Hello, hello, hello. What's going on, my friends, my family? Hope you guys are all doing really well on this lovely Sunday. Sorry, I'm just adjusting my bag. Crappy start. Apologize. All right, bagged up. I'm coming out to, it's Chris Sandeman. Hi, welcome. Welcome to Ellis Island, where we are right now, looking out into the Hudson River. And we've got views into Manhattan and also to New Jersey. And we're going to be doing a live stream right now as best as we can from this island. I've been walking around for the last couple of hours to measure out my bandwidth, and it's average. I hate doing that to you guys and giving you average bandwidth, but you know, as always, do this video live. If it turns out that we have some connectivity issues, you know, I'll post it again up on YouTube, probably Facebook as well. Go ahead, and if you're watching the beginning of this video, whether you're watching it live right now or you're watching it as a video on demand, a playback, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button on YouTube. That helps a ton. Make sure to leave a comment if you've watched it as a recorded video on YouTube as well, and comment freely if you're watching on Facebook. Hearts, thumbs ups, all the rest of that stuff is pretty awesome. What's up, Ross? Good to see you, brother. Greetings to Scotland. Maybe you're in Edinburgh right now. Maybe you're someplace else in Scotland, but no matter where you are, hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful evening. Lorraine Muccia, as you would have probably been called back in the old days. Welcome as well. Just actually saw a Vincent Muccia on the wall of names that is behind me over here. Good morning, Nikki, as well. Hope you're keeping Ross in line. Jill, great to see you. Good morning. Thanks for being up a little bit earlier on your Sunday and beating the heat to come and check out a little bit of what I've got to show you guys. So we started a couple seconds late. I actually learned something new about Prism today. So for all of you folks who are just live stream fanatics, I will be posting a new tutorial video on my personal channel about Prism Live and using this live streaming app, because I discovered something new. It took me a couple of minutes, but I've learned something in the last 8 minutes that I didn't know before. It was useful to know about making sure that I went into the right room for this live stream. Jenny Jean, you know those purple hearts make my red heart beat. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Well, why don't I kind of get us oriented here as we let a couple more folks kind of join in. Your comments, your questions, your thumbs ups, your likes, your shares, all of that stuff helps spread the love and the news of what we're doing here right now. So I greatly appreciate it. But where are we, guys? Where are we right now? Well, we're on Ellis Island. Originally was just about a 5-acre piece of land. And I'm looking actually up here into New Jersey. And that's what you're seeing already over here, because Ellis Island, as it turns out, thank you, Ross, for the hat compliment. Mila, hola, great to see you, great to be here. Simona Riboldi, ciao, ciao bella. And Rebecca Drisdale, thank you for joining. Hello. So as we were saying, we're looking up into New Jersey. Ironically, Ellis Island is actually in New Jersey. So this is not actually a tour of New York. We're in New Jersey right now. But, hear me out, this was a long contested argument as to whether or not Ellis Island was New York or New Jersey. So the buildings here that we're going to be visiting are all New York owned buildings, but the land is New Jersey. So originally these 5 acres of land, it wasn't even a contest of who owned this land. It was, you know, part of New Netherlands as far as everyone was concerned if you were a white settler. And if you were a Lenape Indian, nobody owned this land. Everybody's land to use as they kind of wanted to be able to use, right? Hale, always good to see you. So glad to be part of your beating bench today. Hale saying hi over on YouTube. So that's great. Don't quit. Keep beating. I'm going to be here with you guys for the next 45, 50, 60 minutes. We'll see how long we go and how well our connection stays. Elvira Gim, thank you for being in here and also tagging a couple of your friends to get them to come and join. And Patricia Del Rio, hola, buen dia to you as well. Jenny Stark coming in with the purple heart now on YouTube. Hearted on the Facebook Hearted on the YouTube. Heart, 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 purple hearts. Love them all day long. So great stuff. Back to our story. We're looking at New Jersey. So looking up there, what we can actually see as well, kind of part of our story, kind of neat, is that you can also see right here what used to be a train station depot. And that little train station depot is where, if you were here on this island and you had passed immigration, you were good to go, then you could head over to that train station after you're checked off, and you would take that train maybe to some other part of America. Now, only about a third of the people who would emigrate into Ellis Island or into New York City will stay here. 2/3 of them will continue on to other places. Dragon Lord X, always great to see you over on Twitch. Thanks for joining. Beatriz Lucumbera, thank you very much. Hola to you as well. Jeanette, glad you're checking in. Vancouver Vixen in the house. Although, you know, foxes don't really howl. They kind of yelp, don't they? But, you know, I'm not really sure. I've never owned a fox. Diana Lifshitz, hi, Chris. I'm from Buenos Aires. We visited the island 3 years ago. Oh, well, welcome back then. Glad to return you to Ellis Island on this great day. And Yahaira Catamona, saludos desde Mexico. Okay, thank you very much. Saludos to you as well. Back again. And Michelle Sand, thanks for joining. Now, as I'm looking up, what we're kind of seeing here is a great water view, reminding us that this area of New York Harbor is a series of different islands, and that ships have always been an important part of it. And in fact, this little kind of neat little boat here in front of us, this is a bar boat. You would take a little cruise over to and go drink in the harbor. Jeanette, yelping, not yelling. Sorry if I mispronounced. I mean, not that you're a yelper or a yeller. Neither way, either of those. Nikki and Ross write in from Facebook. Ross and I went to Ellis Island in November of 2019. Was a lot cooler than today. Yes, that's for sure. That is definitely the case. I believe it. Jill writes on YouTube, I was there 3 years ago. Thought I was in New York. Now I can say I've been in New Jersey. Yep, no, that's it. There's ironically a funny story about our disgraced ex-mayor, Rudy Giuliani, who was incensed when the decision finally came down that Ellis Island would be part of New Jersey. He said, my grandparents, they came to the New World on a boat, and they didn't come because they thought they were going to New Jersey. They thought they were going to New York. Anyway, who believes anything that Rudy Giuliani says anymore? But speaking of New York, there it is. Right? And now we can see the very base and bottom of Manhattan, Mannahatta, as the Lenapes would have called it, the island of rolling hills. And we're looking downtown into the financial district. Of course, you can see trade, the one with the green top there, it's 40 Wall Street. Actually, 2 planes have crashed into that building, believe it or not. One in heavy fog, one, I guess, just kind of accidentally, without the heavy fog. It's kind of neat actually from this specific angle, because you can see how many tall buildings there are downtown. Then you can see there aren't a lot of tall buildings right after that. And then in the distance after that, you can start to see tall buildings again, including kind of reaching up to the clouds there, the Empire State Building. And that's because you've got Manhattan schist. Yes, schist. This bedrock that lies below, shallowly lies below Financial District in Lower Manhattan, and then again in Midtown. But in that space between Midtown and the Financial District, you know, you've got soft soil. It's harder to reach the bedrock, that schist. And hence you don't have those same skyscrapers because you can't support all that weight. So they take a look at the watch. The watch says, time to start walking. So let's walk around a little bit as we make our way around into the the Ellis Island Museum and Immigration Center, this old building that's here. I'm going to walk along the water a little bit as we go. Hey, Daniel Musha from Kingston, New York. Recently was in Kingston. We recently did a live stream from Kingston, New York. Make sure you guys check that one out. Unfortunately, the live stream didn't work so well because the connection was kind of crappy up in Kingston from a bandwidth perspective, and we ended up posting that as a later live video. So, have I told you guys about this island and where it comes from? Let's talk about it right now. Okay, a little construction going on here. This, by the way, just to show you real quick, you got a wall of names from people who immigrated here, and you can see all their names. And you know, you're thinking to yourself, well, I went to Ellis Island and I didn't see my relatives' names. Well, guess what? Maybe they didn't come in through Ellis Island, because actually what would happen is that if you were to arrive on a White Star cruise liner from Europe, or maybe you took a Cunard line cruise liner over from somewhere in Europe, you would actually first have your boat out in New York Harbor by immigration inspectors. And they would go and talk to all of the first class and second class passengers. And they'd be like, all right, you guys look good. There'd be a cursory, quick, not in-depth inspection of those people. And they would be allowed to disembark down here on the Hudson River somewhere, up around one of those piers. Actually, piers that we saw both on our Little Island tour and our High Line tours that we did together, where the Cunard liners would come in, where the Lusitania would dock as a before it would head out, where where those rescued victims of the Titanic would be disembarked. Anyway, even without an iceberg hitting your ship, you could get off there if you were in first and second class. But if you were in third class, known as steerage class, not so nice. And after all the regular passengers had disembarked, cleared from first and second class over up on the Hudson, and they're like taking taxis uptown if they want to. I mean, not taxis, but, well, yeah, carriage taxis. They were free to go. But if you were in steerage, you were barged to this island, Ellis Island, and this is where you'd go through your inspection process. Now, 80% of people were done here within 3 to 5 hours. They could just get processed really quick. But if you're one of the 20% who are gonna have to stay for some extra time, for some reason, you didn't pass inspection, then you might be here for weeks or months. Only 2% of people are turned away and sent back to where they had come from. And that's ends up being about 250,000 of the total number of immigrants who try to enter in through Ellis Island are gonna be turned away. Still 250,000 people, 2%. Shows you like the proportions of the numbers of people that came through here, but 2% still, 250,000 people. So, all right, long before this place becomes the center of U.S. immigration, to begin with, it was called Kiosk, or Gull in the Lenape language, Gull Island. And that's what the native people called it, probably because there were so many seagulls on it, and the seagulls were feeding on incredible oyster shoals that were all along here on this little 5-acre outcropping of land. Now, the Dutch will show up, right? Because Henry Hudson will sail up the Hudson River, and when he does in 1609, he sees these waterways and these islands, and he's like, this looks pretty good. And he's working for the Dutch, even though he's an Englishman. And the Dutch will come by 1624. First, they'll set up their first kind of settlement on Governor's Island, which you can actually see over here, just beyond some of this construction space. There you go. That's Governor's Island over there. And then they were like, nah, Governor's Island's kind of small. Let's instead go to Manhattan Island. And that's New Amsterdam, the center of the capital of the New Netherlands. And they called this Little Oyster Island. The Brits would call it the same, ultimately, and say, yeah, Little Oyster Island, this works for us too, until, Jeanette, to answer your question, no form of passport control or other registration in a national system at that time. You wouldn't necessarily have a lot of documentation as an immigrant who was coming. The most important thing was that you weren't sick and that you weren't an anarchist or a communist. There was a time where they wanted you to have $25 in your pocket to prove that you weren't destitute. That was an issue, although they didn't really enforce it that much. The larger issue was, were you Asian or Eastern European? And then, well, we'll talk more about the discrimination that those groups of people faced. Limits placed on the numbers of Asians that could enter into the United States started as early as the 1880s. And by the 1920s, there's new laws that are being passed to really hold back Eastern Europeans, Southern Europeans, and promote immigration instead of Western Europeans, which were kind of seen as the good Europeans in the absolutely racist and like illegitimate way that people would have looked at it. Now, here's the, really quick, because I'm telling some of this history, these are the ships, the boats that you kind of come in on when you come to visit this auspicious location. Let me show you really quick as I'm talking, as I was riding in, we got some good views of the Statue of Liberty. And let me just show you this video real fast of that. This video playing? I honestly cannot tell. Now it's playing, good. Okay, so this is us riding by the Statue of Liberty, and I wanted to show this to you guys because it kind of gives you a feeling of what those immigrants coming to the New World would have been seeing after they had, you know, kind of driven down the Hudson a little bit and all the wealthy passengers had gotten off the boat. They're going to go past the Statue of Liberty and make their way over towards Ellis Island, where they are going to be inspected and hopefully released very quickly. So that was a quick video there that I took just about an hour and a half ago. And then why don't, there's a ship going, why don't I show you guys this video as well, as we're just kind of talking. And here's a video of me landing into Ellis Island. So this is really very similar, right? What people would have seen starting in 1892. That's when this gorgeous building that we're going to be walking around and exploring, that's when this building is first constructed. Now, you had another immigration building here in 1890 that they'd built up. Excuse me, I apologize. 1892 is when the original building that was here goes up. It's not until 1900, right? 1900, 8 years later, that the building that we're going to be exploring is actually constructed and goes into place. The original building here was a 2-story tall building. And now in the video you guys are watching, you're seeing kind of the pan out to Manhattan Island. You can see the Brooklyn Bridge around there in the East River. Of course, the East River being to the east of Manhattan, the Hudson River being to the west. Hudson River could have been called the West River, except it's the river that Henry Hudson, sailed up in 1609. So he got to name it. So the building that we're going to be looking at goes up in 1900, and it replaces the original building that was here in 1892, which unfortunately had burned down in 1897, I want to say. I'm going to double check that for us in a second. It was made out of white Georgia pine. And unfortunately, you know, you didn't have like the creme de la creme, you didn't have the top crop of workers here. And there was like a semi-crazy night watchman who is reputedly the one who started the fire well, burned down that other building. Well, the good news is it meant that we got to have a new and fantastic other building that ends up getting built here instead. And that building is built by the architects Edward Tilton and William Boring. And I'll tell you what, if you look at William Boring's architectural style, I'll say it's not dull one bit. They win the contract to build this Beaux-Arts style massive building, reminiscent in a way of what a European train station might look like. Very welcoming and comforting probably for a lot of the people that were coming off the boat, because they could look at it and see and say, this seems familiar to me. This kind of feels like home. $1.5 million, and they actually beat out McKin, Mead & White to become the architectural firm who gets to build this building. McKin, Mead & White, if you guys remember from our Upper West Side Columbia University tour, were the guys that get the contract to build a lot of the buildings up at Columbia University. They are also experts of Beaux-Arts style construction. Thank you very much, video, for playing. You are now done. Oh, look, we're standing in front of that building that we were just looking at. Here we are. Zooming out a little bit. All right, it's far. Right, like we were saying, our good friends with this Beaux-Arts style gorgeous building, and a very welcoming place for these new Americans, or new future Americans, to arrive to. So let's walk in ourselves, and as we go, as I enter in, I am going to mask up, and if the connection starts to get funky, I'm going to kind of skedaddle along a little bit as we move. So I was talking about the history of this island before, and I kind of got jumped around a little bit by myself and by you lovely people and questions and such. And I didn't actually talk about one of the iterations of the names of this space. This island, actually, after it's called Little Oyster Island, goes on to be called Gibbets Island. And the reason why they call it Gibbets Island is because of this picture right here. That is a gibbet cage. And this was a warning to pirates who were looking to antagonize New York Harbor. If you were going to come in and make a mess of good old New York Harbor, then you might end up yourself, you might end up yourself in a gibbet's cage, where you would hang till you were dead. Exposure and maybe eaten by birds and terrible things like that. But certainly you know what it makes me think of, the gibbet's cage? It makes me think of Mad Mardigan. Mad Mardigan in one of my favorite movies called Willow. I haven't seen Willow in a long time. I mean, honestly, like, it is an amazing movie. And Mad Mardigan is like just a legendary character. And he's stuck in a gibbet's cage when Willow, the halfling guy, kind of like a hobbit, but he's a, what do they call them? I know that the humans are dakinis. Anyway, he sets them free. Anyway, we're gonna move on. So Gibbets Island for a while, and then finally, that's when it happens. John Samuel Ellis buys the island in like 1780, I think it is, and he's decided what he's going to do is he's going to put up a tavern here for sailors. That sailors are going to be able to stop in on their way to New York Harbor. Not a lot of foot traffic, but a fair amount of boat traffic, that doesn't really work out that well. He's trying to sell the property, and finally in 1808, War of 1812, banned it, and they built a fort on it to be able to protect against the British. That fort doesn't actually get constructed until 1817, well after the end of the War of 1812, and it never sees any handled, not by the federal government, but by the state of New York. As their point from the 1850s. Now, it's run so badly, there's so much corruption, so many young women coming off the boats are being kidnapped into prostitution, taking advantage, grifters, suckering people, that finally the federal government steps in by 18. The money out of this, we're not going to let you keep immigration. This is now going to become a federal question. The state promptly throws the federal government out of Castle Clinton and says you can't use it, that's state property. And then they go, oh yeah, but we've got that island, that Ellis Island. Let's use that. So I'm walking up the stairs now into the main hall. And if you were an immigrant coming up these stairs into the main hall, they would have been doctors standing here and here and here. Inspectors looking at you and watching you as you walk up the stairs. Do you limp as you walk up the stairs? Do you shuffle? Are you out of breath? Are you coughing blood into a napkin? What's going on? This was actually part of your inspection already. How well can you get up the stairs? And if you get up the stairs poorly, they might already mark your jacket with some sort of insignia to say, this person's got a problem. And in fact, I'm going to show you guys this. Pull this up real quick. Hopefully you can see this picture I took earlier on. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen right now some of the different marks that you would get. An X might mean that you've got some mental impairment. If you've got a CT, then maybe you've got trachoma. That would have been really bad. Trachoma was a disease they were especially worried about people having, and it was a highly contagious kind of form of eye chlamydia. You get bumps underneath your eyelid, very transmissible, and eventually turns your eyelids inside out, can lead to permanent blindness. So that's one they really would have been, they'd have really been looking for. Well, there's all sorts of things. An L if you were lame, an S if you might be senile. But often those markings were used in a way that were really just discriminating against people that they didn't. So Jeanette asked a question. Thank you, Jeanette, for asking a question, by the way. Would it have looked as clean, do you think? Would it have been tiled? And the answer is yes and yes. It would have been very clean inside the space. There's over 700 people that were working for the Ellis Island Authority in its heyday. And even though you'd have been processing at its height, in 1907, for instance, which was the busiest year Ellis Island ever had, 1 million immigrants come through. That's about 2,700 people a day being processed through Ellis Island. And they ran a really tight ship. Now, today, it's been remodeled and renovated because in 1954, when they stopped using this space pretty much permanently, it went through a period of decay and it just wasn't looking very good anymore. But Iacocca, of all people, that's a name from the past that makes anyone's eyes raise up. He was a famous titan of industry and for a while, Chrysler money and Iacocca kind of come together and space to help us see what it would have looked like starting in, from 1912 to 1950. It's back to that kind of original grandeur. And it's not just tiling that we have down here on the ground, of course, but we've got tiling up above us here in the registry room. And it's this tiling which actually kind of attracted me to come back to Ellis Island in the first place. These are the same sorts of tiles that we've seen recently over by Bryant Park. It's this Gustavian form of tiling. It's a Catalan Spanish tile form brought over by Rafael Gustavino, and it's gorgeous. It's really beautiful. You see it in a couple other places in New York. Do I have any pictures? Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, you guys might have seen this one the other day. This is a picture of down below the City Hall, New York City Hall, and the City Hall subway station stop, which is no longer an active subway station stop, but you can see the same sort of tiles down there as well. All right, so here you are. You arrive, and there's a ton of people in front of you. There's lines of folks all heading up through this registry hall, waiting to make their way up to the front of the line, to the front of the queue, to then be asked a series of questions. Now, in the very beginning, those questions were quite easy to answer. And in fact, the famous story of the very first woman, the very first immigrant to arrive at Ellis Island in 1890 into the old building that used to be here, was a young Irish woman from Cork, kind of handpicked to be one of the best ones you could have used, and the predominant questions. As long as you're not either of those things, you more or less are and ready to enter. Over time, though, as immigration continues to grow, that becomes sorts of questions and things that you would be asked in order to finally be able to enter into the space. Annie Moore, that was her name, reminding myself. Annie Moore was that first girl from Cork. 14 years old, and they reward her with a $10 gold coin. Yes, I agree, Jeanette. Very cool windows. And the space in here, there's an echo. You can feel the age of it in these tiles. And they've done such a great restoration job. And this little kind of, a little bit more than a Juliet balcony. And this view here is special to me because you can see, first of all, you can see the old barracks. If you were going to stay for longer and you weren't going to be in and out, this is where they would bunk you, in these dormitories over here. And then in the distance, once again, never forget, we are no longer on Manhattan Island. That's over there. You can see the Empire State Building kind of sticking up in the distance as well. So, you make your way. Look, these kids are perfect because they're showing us exactly how this process would have happened. So you get to the front of the line. Who is here? One of the staff members who would be asking you, what's your name? Where are you coming from? What's happening? Oh, it's perfect. You guys are you're stars of the new movie. I'm how they're still hanging out. So actually a misnomer. A lot of people say, it's like camera shy, future star. There's a misnomer. A lot of people would say that actually they would change your name, right? They would change your name when you come through here. And although that is a very, very typical and wonderful urban legend, there's really not a lot of evidence that they would change people's names. It happened, for sure. But it happened kind of like voter fraud in the US. No, not voter fraud. Voter fraud, unfortunately, happens all the time. No, not voter suppression happens all the time. Voter fraud happens rarely. That's what I mean to say. Right, Georgia? Voter fraud, changing people's names was something that happened pretty infrequently. And the reason is that these desk clerks that were sitting in here, right, they were actually going off of the ship's manifest, right? And they were looking at the manifest to decide who you were for the most part. And then they were just writing down your name on your intake papers based upon whatever the manifest had said. See, you were required actually to have not money, but you had to buy a round trip ticket. When you were coming in to this new port of entry, this new world, from whatever destination whatever port of origin you'd left from, they would require you to have your return passage in case you were not admitted. It's actually kind of a good gig for the cruise lines. They make good money off of that. At the same time, though, the cruise lines would be held responsible if they allowed people who weren't going to be admitted onto the boat to begin with. So the cruise lines start to check out your conditions and inspect you while you're still in Hamburg or in London, or not London, maybe Liverpool, or in Dublin, or wherever you're leaving from to head to the new world. This job eventually ends up getting taken over by embassies, right? That's what embassies do. They grant you a visa in the country that you're leaving from. And when that policy from the State Department takes effect in the 1950s, you don't really need Ellis Island anymore because you're no longer inspecting people when they're arriving here. You're inspecting people back home, wherever they've come from. So that's kind of the story there. If you were held in Ellis Island and you were required to stay here for a period of some weeks or days while they were checking a curable medical condition, or there was some other, they suspected you maybe of being a contract worker, if you were brought here to work, to take jobs basically, by a company, and they suspected you of that, you might be held. And then there was a special court process that you could go through here at Ellis Island in order to appeal the decision to send you back. And actually 80% of the people that go to that appeal process are allowed to stay. Very few people then said they send them back. So remember, the vast majority of people, first and second class passengers, they all go right through. I mean, not the vast majority, that's the minority of people. They go right through, right onto Manhattan Island after they get off the Hudson. So then you have all the steerage class passengers, they come here and they go through this process, and only about 20% of them will be held for longer than a few hours, and only 2% of them will end up being turned away. Kind of gives you a sense of it. Jeanette makes a great comment, which is that the reflection of the windows on the floor creates complete circles. very pleasing design. Let's flip it back around again and keep on learning, huh? Let's keep on going. This beautiful building. Also, Jill writes, I took a photo there as well, beautiful view, and Michelle also comments on the beauty of this space. It really is a fantastic spot. And to consider that before the renovation, one of these chandeliers had crashed to the ground. They had to run a fan dehumidification process for weeks to get the damp out of the building because it was just so wet in here. So first things first, you're going to clear your first process here of registering, kind of coming in. They're making sure that you can understand what they're saying, and there's going to be interpreters that are here as well who are helping you in case you don't actually speak the language, English, of the most likely the desk agent. The interpreters, ironically, and this is a really cool story too, they were often on the side, not of the state, but they were on the side of the immigrants, because they were potentially immigrants themselves, or recent immigrants, or descendants of immigrants. I mean, it's kind of like the sad irony of the US is that as we start to lock down on immigration, you have to ask yourself how many of those politicians are actually descendants of immigrants who now don't like immigrants. Weird, right? Something to ask ourselves. The translators often would change the answers that the immigrants were providing back to the official because they knew that it was a better answer. They'd help them out a little bit, and that was pretty typical as well. And actually, Fiorello LaGuardia, who would go on to become one of New York's greatest mayors. We named an airport after him. He was a translator here. The guy was brilliant. He spoke 3 languages officially, Serbian, Italian, English, and he helped translate for people that were coming through and giving them the kind of the benefit of the doubt as that would happen. So kind of a neat thing. All right, so you've done your paperwork. You've kind of gotten through the first stage. Hopefully no one's put an X on your jacket saying that you are not fit, or you don't have any chalk on your jacket yet. And if you have gotten chalk on your jacket, some of the wiser immigrants would take their jackets and just flip them inside out, so you couldn't see that they got chalked up. They could still go in to the next process, because first you got to get your paperwork, and then we're going to have to, in order to go through America's gates, we're going to have an examination, because one of the right? And that is a massive concern. Now, as we go through some of these rooms, I'm not going to dilly-dally in these, but it does show some of the great exhibits that the Ellis Island Immigration Museum has put up here. But there are a couple of images that I do want to show, and this is Trachoma. And you can see what they're using here, a hook. And in theory, it was for people who were trying to button up their shirts. You'd stick the button hook through, let me show you a closer one up here. Here's a zoomed in version of a button hook for you guys, so you can really see it. You would put that through the hole in your shirt, and then hook around the button, and then pull it back through your hole in your shirt if your fingers were too slippery or big or whatever. And in this, using this and sticking it in people's eyelids. And apparently the pain you'd feel for days, for hours, potentially days if they damaged your eye as they were doing it. I have to wonder, do they sterilize the button hook between each eyelid that they're looking at? But it goes to show you kind of like what their primary concern was. They did not want into the US. And either you would have a curable disease, in which case you would stay here for a while, or you'd have an incurable disease. And if you had an incurable disease, you were one of the 2% who were heading back again, heading back. Women were not allowed to leave Ellis Island unless they had a male companion. or they had money and letters secured from other relatives somewhere in the US that had invited them to come back, to come and live with them in Chicago or something like that. Otherwise, they'd have to stay. And in fact, it meant that for many women, one of the first things that they get married already. Someone. You are for was that women late 1800s degree of suffrage and personal shepherding, like they were still a second. A little bit of connection issue. I'm going to try over here closer to the wall, to the window. We are in an old building. Remember, a building that was built out of limestone and brick to not burn. Thick for our modern day technology. Looking at here is one of those hearing rooms. Where you would go to if they thought to myself, person is actually a contract worker or an anarchist, or there's some other question we have. We want to do some further investigation. One of the 20% that can't go through right away. Hey, Alba, thanks for joining. Alba writes on Facebook, head Italian. Oh, cool. I wonder if he knew Ferrello LaGuardia. If LaGuardia and him might. You were turned board, and they said no. Skill level that you could go through. Now, Oasis there was a different language. But outside. All right, we're going to get past this. I do want to try to connect with you. So let's get back out through here and back into the main room. And looks like signal has returned and we're back on full speed, which is what I want to have for sure. It's kind of interesting picture here that I want to show you guys. Despite the things I am about to talk about, I want to show you just an idea of the types of work that native and foreign-born Americans were doing. And you kind of get a sense of how there are some industries, of course, which are still Americans, but a lot of the work that was being done. Good, Ross, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you saw that. That room was bad signal. I had to leave it to get back out again to a better space where we could have a little bit more signal. the amount of immigration that takes place is mind-blowing. It's the largest period of, at least one of, if not the largest period of immigration that we know or have recorded in history. 1907, like I said before, being that really, really big year where over 1 million people would end up coming through. But actually, from 1905 to 1907 alone, you've got 3.5 million people who enter the U.S. and they come through this location. Going back a little bit in time, it's interesting to think about what those numbers were for, all the way back even into the the mid 1800s, being Irish potato famine immigrants. And from 1845, 1.5 million Irish will travel to New York. Well, they won't come to Ellis Island because Ellis Island won't be here yet. They'll end up going through Castle Clinton. But it shows you sort of the number of people. By 1890, 10% of all of Sweden had moved to the United States. 500,000 people. And between 1880 to 1924, all in all, 25 million immigrants had come to the US. Half of them, just around, came through this building. Over 12 million people during a 44-year period of time. And that is a ginormous shift in immigration, in population. And it also kind of gives us a sense of why eventually quite discriminatory laws start to be passed as the U.S. struggles to maintain the ideals of the Statue of Liberty, enlightening the world, and all the rest. Starts to balance that against the concerns of labor groups, which feel like their jobs are being taken. It's actually one of the reasons why the first real form of anti-immigrant racism is against Asian. Care whether you're Chinese or Japanese or Jeanette writes, where would West Coast immigrants be processed? Was there a similar facility? And I believe San Francisco was the big intake location for especially like Chinese immigrants who were coming through. But after 1880, with Chinese immigration reduced, largely because of, let's be honest, railroad system. If it hadn't been for Chinese, the railroads wouldn't have, existed. Like guys like Vanderbilt, everything would have been different. And it's exactly that, partially that reason, I think, that a lot of the working labor groups are effective at building. We have to stop them from coming in. In 1921 and then finally 1924, you have the Immigration Act passed. And what they do there, to seem not so overtly racist, is that they say, we're going to look at the existing populations of, thank you, Ross, for that, Angel Island. You know better than I do about West Coast. Advertising around here at Ellis Island saying, hey, you're arriving to the New World, get a train to California. And it was perfectly timed. This wave of immigration coming from Europe in the 1850s into the early 1900s, or 1920s, because the US was industrializing and it was hungry for labor, it needed more work. And so immigrants filled that box. They checked that box for the US, which was the second industrializer, Germany. It was a later industrializer. So when it was industrialized, you needed the people. And so a lot of the people were being recruited to, but to not look so overtly racist, one of the things that the US would do, we're going to have a kind of a chain migration or chain immigration. Percentages of the population of Americans today, and if we think that we're like this percentage German and this percentage Irish, this percentage English, good Western European kind of percentages, we're going to make sure that as we reduce first down to 250,000 people a year, like 240,000 people a year, down from 1 million in 1907, by 1921 it was only 250,000 people that were going to be allowed in annually. That reduced by 1924 down to 150,000 people annually. And the percentages had to be maintained. That if we were this percentage German and this percentage English, that percentage applied to the 150,000 people that were coming in. So if we were only like 3% Italian, you couldn't have more than 3% of those 150,000 people being Italian. Part of the argument was, well, people would already have friends and family and communities, so they could more easily integrate when they arrived if they were represented already in communities. But it was also a way to not allow undesirable immigrants from Eastern Europe, from Southern Europe. You know, I mean, there seems to be like a pattern of brown-skinned people generally that weren't being welcomed as open-armed. That all changes finally, thank goodness, by 1965. And in 1965, the US passes new immigration laws as that kind of period of liberalization that the 60s were in the US politics. And it became illegal to discriminate against people based upon the country of origin, and instead it was simply a first come first served basis. You know, you get in the list and then you can start to come. All right, let's go downstairs again. We'll explore a little bit down there in our last 7 to 10 minutes or so, and I'll try to keep the good bandwidth. But one last look around this room, and to think back and just imagine that for decades, thousands of people daily, almost like cattle, lined up in this room, right? On this floor, looking up at this ceiling, looking out through these windows at the same sort of light that we're looking at right now. And they made their way up to those desks, terrified that they might be turned away, not sure where they would go if they were not allowed to come here, and not even sure where here was and what new life would await them. And gosh, I mean, I'm actually giving myself goosebumps right now. And all I can say is that statistically speaking, immigrants are harder working, are less likely to commit crimes, and are really a lot of are the historical lifeblood of this country. And I just hope that as climate change forces, unfortunately, more and more immigration driven by the necessity for people to, escape to a better life. You remember, the immigrants that were coming to the U.S., they weren't leaving paradise. They were leaving problems. They were saying, I would rather risk my life than stay where I am because I am more certain that I will survive if I leave than if I stay. And that's something that we just got to take with us and remember in the next decades to come, because, guys, you look at this immigration story, and it's not like the best and the brightest. It's amazing what happened at Ellis Island, and it's amazing that America opened its arms, but it also closed its arms to a lot of people. And we look now at what's happening with South America and Central America due to climate change, people heading up through Mexico eventually to make it to the U.S. southern border. And we look what's happened with Syria and immigrants coming through Turkey into Eastern and then Western Europe. We really have to ask ourselves, if aliens are watching, how are they judging us? How are we treating each other? And as things get more desperate, food gets more expensive, less land becomes arable, and people are forced to migrate, what are we going to do? We got to start solving those questions and asking ourselves those tough questions, I think, sooner than later, because it's on our doorstep right now. So, all right, we're going downstairs. Sorry for punching. Jeanette writes, I remember a spot where there are a bunch of handwritten notes on a wall where people had to stay while looking out into the promised land. Yeah, there's a room that I can't get it to us right now without potentially losing signal, which has a lot of graffiti from people that were interred here, as well as lots of letter writing. And there are tons of great first-person letters from the time where you would. While you were waiting to be released, you'd write to people, whether they be back home or just scalp health exam, and then they'd let you go. This is just to show you a little bit like what people were traveling with. They didn't have their nice Toomey, or American standard luggage. People were coming with their boxes. Shouting out to you, Jeanette. Just second with the scribbles, both letters and those graffitis as well. This old. Both, and both nice to really be solid, but they are. That is a solid supporting beam right here, and. We're not going to dig in any deeper. We'll just head outside. Take one last look out on the outside of the building. And then I'll wish you guys all really well and hope that you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Not to leave you, no cold water. I'm not leaving right away, but slowly and surely, we're going to head out. Maybe I'll tell a story about Black Tom explosion. 1916, you actually had a big bomb go off right over there, right over here in the harbor. And what it was that there was an island there called Black Tom Island. And in 1915, what had happened was that until 1915, if you were a U.S. munitions producer, if you were producing ammunition or shells, or weapons, you could sell it to any country in the world. But 1915, we're in the middle of World War I, and by 1916, the British Royal Navy has barricaded. That's not the word. It's not called barricading. It's when. Blockade. Sorry, my brain fart. They'd blockaded Germany, so you could no longer ship munitions anymore to Germany. In response to that, the German imperial government, right, because it's the royal family of the Hohenzollerns back in the day, William II, and that they start to send spies and saboteurs into the U.S. And one group of them get onto Black Tom Island, and where there's a munitions factory and munitions storage, depot there, and they blew it up. In April of 1916, and the explosion was so devastatingly large. It did $20 million worth of damage back in those days, that it actually damaged the Statue of Liberty as well as Ellis Island because of the impact of it. Windows were blown in here on Ellis Island, and the torch that Lady Liberty Enlightening the World is holding was damaged as well and needed to be repaired. Wasn't until 1974 that finally the payments for the damages that were done were finally paid off by the German government. In the end, they ended up paying $95 million back. So 20 million to 95 million. Took a while before it happened, but there's a little story about something else that happened here on the island. I don't know if that's the right story to end with. I think we should end with a story of hope and prosperity, and see that this space, this door behind us, is a space where so many future Americans would end up walking through as they start their great journey into this country, whether they ended up in Chicago or whether they ended up in Los Angeles or San Francisco or ended up heading down the coast to Florida. The entry point for so many Americans starts here. And in fact, if you look back on it today, it's some wild percentage of Americans. Many of you guys who are watching right now can trace your heritage, if you're an American, your heritage through someone that came through Ellis Island. And even if you're not an American, you probably very likely could have had a relative who was part of this world's largest on paper immigration movement that we've come to know. So it's a pretty incredible time where people caught America fever, and not only were they very excited to come, but America was very excited to have them. So, let's not forget that immigrants are the backbone of this country. And by the way, it's worth mentioning, even if I was born an American, I didn't actually come to the U.S. Until I was like 3-4 years old. So I was a little tot to live here, and so I often look at myself as being an immigrant as well, and I'm damn proud of it. So immigrants get it done, and I think that the story of Ellis Island certainly proves that. No matter the button hooks under people's eyes or being chalked up and having to go through hearings about whether you could actually enter the country, being discriminated against based upon your country of origin or how much money you had in your pocket, or maybe your level of intelligence, people fought and made it through the system to help build this country into what it eventually became. And no one can take away the fact that America was taken away from the Native American people who were here before, but it was built up into what it was by not just the first wave of immigrants, but the successive waves of immigrants who came over the decades to come. So, God bless the immigrants. Mwah, guys, thank you very much for coming. Hale, great to see you. Jill, awesome always. Jenny, a pleasure. Nikki and Ross, love you guys so much. Can't wait to, the weeks are counting down. You guys are almost there. The big day is coming. Very exciting stuff. Can't wait to see all the photos and all the rest of that. Hale, thanks for the compliment. I appreciate that. It's hard not to show beauty here. It's such an awesome place to be able to show. Alba writes, you had to have a relative here and a place to live. If you were coming in through steerage, it was definitely going to help. Although sometimes there were immigrant aid societies, Jewish society, German society, Italian society, and they could often help get you through as well and fight for your petition for you. But a relative who was sponsoring you was definitely a way to go. Michaela, I hope you. Hey, Michaela, I spoke with Anna in St. Petersburg, which I think you were just in potentially, and we're going to be doing a St. Petersburg tour with Anna here on our channel very soon as well, which is going to be very, very cool. Nikki, thank you. The countdown is on indeed. Simona Riboldi, prego mille. Thank you for coming. Rebecca, Stuart, you get a hands wave back to you, lady. Hope you're keeping cool down in Georgia, wherever you might be, whether that be Buckhead or Atlanta. Hope you're enjoying. Daniel Musha, always a pleasure. Thank you for coming back again. Jeanette, mwah. I got nothing but big kisses for you. And I think I've touched on everybody who said goodbye right now. So if I missed you, it wasn't on purpose. It's only because You know, I've got so much love to give. I want to keep giving it out. So really appreciate you guys, and have a great Sunday. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll be in touch again very, very soon. Got to figure out the next live stream. So hit me with requests. Let me know what you want to see. Hit me up on DM me or in the comments down below. I spend probably like half my time learning new content right now for the next live streams that we're doing, and you directing me helps inspire me as well into what it is that we should be learning next. Well, with that, adieu. Thank you from Ellis Island in New York City, an island that was built up by the dirt of our subway system and expanded to be able to house this incredible space that we're in. I hope you guys, Michaela asked, did we show the Annie Moore statue? We didn't show the Annie Moore statue because I started to walk towards it and we started to get weak signal. But Annie Moore, guys, she is that young 14-year-old girl from Cork, Ireland, who was the first lady to be processed on Ellis Island in 1892, on January 1st, 1892, when the building that is not this building, but the old wooden building that burned down was here. She was the lady that came through first. So Michaela, thank you for asking that question. It's a really good one. All right, gorgeous. Beautiful day. And I'm gonna head over here and get in this line to take the ferry to New Jersey, because I'm going to go try out a new pizza place, which I've read about over there recently, which is supposed to be one of like the really killer great pizza places. I'm going to tell you guys what it's called, so in case you're ever making your way over, you can know as well. My phone has no signal. Nope. Come on. No signal. Nothing happening here, just blank spaces. Anyway, I think it's called like Ravi's or Ravus. I'm gonna post it for you guys. I'm gonna post it in the comments of this. You can see what the pizza place is that I'm going to next. All right, mwah. Take care, guys. Have a great day.